It's a big day in the world of Indiana athletics. Good morning, I'm Nick Rodecap with you on IU Sports Sunday. It's finally sunny in Bloomington, and the weather is actually tolerable, which means that March is right around the corner. Indiana men's basketball has a great opportunity later today to get itself closer to the right side of the NCAA tournament bubble. And if they don't take advantage of this opportunity today, depending on who you ask, it may be their last chance to get to the right side of the bubble. It's been a while since Indiana has even played a game. It's rare that they get 9 days off in the middle of the season, and they didn't get 9 days off. They got 8. They last played on Friday the 14th. That was Valentine's Day against UCLA, which feels like a lifetime ago because of all the off-the-court rumblings surrounding this program, but it was only 8 days ago. I guess it was 9. It hasn't been 9 full days. Well, we're arguing semantics, but Indiana lost by 4 points to UCLA, and it was a game that they felt like they had to have. Although it feels like every game you should probably have if you're Indiana basketball. They've lost a lot of home games this year, which is unusual. The Hoosiers looking to defend the Hall today at 1:30 against Purdue. 11-4 at home, 15-11 overall, and 6-9 in the Big Ten. And with plenty of action-packed days of basketball behind us in the Big Ten, we now get a clearer look of where Indiana stands. The Hoosiers are tied with USC, which is weird because you remember Indiana beat USC, and that game wasn't particularly close. You thought maybe USC was one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, and they are, but so too is Indiana. Michigan State sits alone at the top over Michigan by a game after winning in Ann Arbor, did Michigan State. Earlier this week, that was a thrilling game, and it was somewhat puzzling after the game because Vlad Golden, the Michigan big fella, their center, proposed to his girlfriend on the court after the loss, which, you'd think, okay, you do it after a win. That makes sense. That's what one of Curt Cignetti's relatives did. I think it was his son or daughter. I don't remember which. But there was a Cignetti that proposed to their fiancé-to-be on the field after the Hoosiers beat Michigan in football. It makes sense to do it after a win, but doing it after a loss is interesting. Michigan State at the top, then Michigan, Maryland, Purdue. Maryland and Purdue are tied along with Wisconsin, who lost to Oregon yesterday at home. They blew a 17-point lead. Where was that against Indiana? You couldn't blow a 22-point lead against Indiana? That would have been nice. But it didn't happen. Then UCLA, Illinois, Oregon, Nebraska, Ohio State, and Indiana. Remember, the bottom three don't make the Big Ten tournament. So right now, those bottom three are Northwestern, Penn State, and Washington, which is particularly interesting because Indiana plays two of those three down the stretch this season. They'll take on Penn State after Purdue, and they'll take on Washington on the West Coast here in about 2 weeks. Those could be very pivotal games depending on how Indiana fares, especially today against Purdue, and how those teams fare between now and their meetings with the Hoosiers as well. So we take a look at Purdue, and we take a look at where they stand. It's unusual for Purdue to be in the spot that they're in right now. The Boilers have lost 3 games in a row for the first time in 5 years, which I think is a remarkable testament to their consistency as a program under Matt Painter. You think about who was one of the common denominators for them over the last 4 years. Zach Edey, the obvious answer. But really just a phenomenal meter of consistency, and Purdue really is slumping right now. It feels like maybe they peaked a little bit too early as far as when they were playing their best basketball. They took down Alabama back in November. They've got a slew of solid wins, but really, Purdue has not been themselves over the last few weeks. They had some games that they needed to win in this latest stretch, and they just could not come through. They lost at Michigan State. They lost to Wisconsin at home. Wisconsin, in that game, shot the lights out at Mackey Arena. Really took the energy out of that building, which is not easy to do. And then the game before that, Purdue goes up to Michigan, and they had a chance to close it out, much like Indiana has in a few games this season. But the Boilermakers, with a little help from the officials, saw that one slip away in Ann Arbor. That was the game that gave Michigan the top spot in the Big Ten. But the Wolverines could not hold on. So Purdue's last win was on February 7th against USC. That was a game that I actually went to up in West Lafayette. Mackey Arena was deafening. Quite a cool experience, but Purdue has not won since then, so maybe you should thank me. I'll take credit. I'll take all the credit in the world. But the Boilermakers now, really, their Big Ten title hopes are pretty much gone. Short of a miracle, I don't know that Purdue has any chance of winning the Big Ten. In the regular season, they could always win the conference tournament, but given that they're pretty much a lock for the NCAA tournament at this point, I don't really know how many eggs Matt Painter wants to put in that basket. So we look to today at 1:30 on CBS. Indiana will take on Purdue. And you remember the last time that these teams played, it was at Mackey Arena back in late January, and Indiana lost by 5 points. That was a game that the Hoosiers really had in hand. At least you thought they had a shot to win that game late. Instead, what happened was Miles Rice decided to play hero ball when he had no business playing hero ball, got stuffed by Jakari Harris, and then Trey Kaufman-Renn made free throws to salt the game away on the other end. I really hope that outgoing head coach Mike Woodson does not put the ball in the hands of Miles Rice to decide the game, because if he does, Indiana will lose. And I think that's been very apparent for a while now. Miles Rice is not clutch. That's okay. Not everybody is clutch. But as a coach, you have to know which players you can count on when the game is on the line. Miles Rice is not one of those players for Indiana. Neither was Mackenzie Mbako against UCLA. You remember, well, Miles Rice took a bad shot first, yes. But then Mackenzie Mbako had a wide-open layup under the left side of the hoop. He blew the layup, and then off a baseline out-of-bounds play, which was actually a well-drawn-up play, Mbako got an open look at a corner three that would have tied the game, I believe. And he missed that too. So I don't know if Mackenzie Mbako had an off night. That was, of course, last Friday, the 14th. A lot has gone on since then. You know, you can flush it mentally. But that could not have been easy for Mackenzie Mbako to sleep that night, knowing that he had a couple chances to either tie or give Indiana the lead late against the Bruins, and he could not come through. And the three-point shot was an open look. That was the kind of the story for Indiana against UCLA last weekend, was the open looks. They just couldn't knock him down. Something tells me they're going to have to knock those down today. In these kinds of rivalry games, you know, you look at what happened to Illinois last night against Duke. What in the world? They started the game, I think, 0 of 17 from 3 did Illinois. And my question that I asked one of my friends, I asked him, where was that against Indiana? Because Illinois hung 90-plus on Indiana like it was nothing. But the Illini had no trouble not making shots against Duke. I believe that game ended, it was 110-67, just a total shellacking, showing how far Illinois has fallen since the early part of the season. But yeah, you look at the final score for the Illini at Madison Square Garden, 110-67. Quite clear that they are not where they need to be, partly thanks to the flu. I think there's been something going around, not just Illinois, but feels like the IU campus as well. Knock on wood, I've been pretty fortunate not to get it. But Illinois has just been decimated. They were 2 of 26 from 3, 0 of 16 in the first half. That's not going to cut it. If Indiana puts up a performance like Illinois did, if the Hoosiers do that today, shooting from 3 against Purdue, it will probably be a very long afternoon at Assembly Hall. But I think the funniest possible thing would be if Indiana beats Purdue today and then loses to Penn State on Wednesday at home. Penn State is bad. Now, they played Indiana very close at the Palestra, but that was at the Palestra. This is Assembly Hall. It would be so funny if Indiana, say, just is surgical, dominant, lights out against Purdue today, which is very possible considering how Purdue has played lately. They are very beatable. They could not guard the perimeter against Wisconsin. So Indiana can take advantage of that. You can get hot, rivalry game, crowd behind you instead of against you like it was at Mackey. It's very possible Indiana wins this game today. But you also put a lot of your eggs in that basket emotionally going into a rivalry game, and sometimes you have a little bit of myopia. You're a little short-sighted when it comes to the opponent after the rival. Being Penn State, you just, I don't know. I know self-imposed limitations, right? Thank you, Curt Cignetti. But it would be very, very funny and on brand if they beat Purdue and lose to Penn State. Much like what happened when Indiana went to East Lansing. They beat Michigan State, mostly because Michigan State forgot how to shoot the basketball. But yes, Indiana beat Michigan State, and then they came home and lost to UCLA. Now, Michigan State is objectively a better team, but the games are not played on paper. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Welcome back to IU Sports Sunday. Nick Rotocap with you On this February 23rd, it's the last Sunday of February. Wow. I just realized that myself. That's actually kind of surprising. I guess time flies when you're having fun, and a month only has exactly 28 days, which tends to happen every so often. It's a big day, not just for Indiana men's basketball, but for Indiana women's basketball as well. They had a massive Thursday night. They took down number 8 Ohio State by 10. That game was never close, actually. It was a phenomenal win for Indiana women's basketball at home against Ohio State. Second time they've beaten them in Assembly Hall in a ranked matchup in 3 years, as I recall. They beat them my freshman year. I went with a roommate and some friends, if I remember correctly. That was a fun game. Indiana took down the Buckeyes 71-61 on Thursday night, and that was a much-needed win. Much-needed win because the women were kind of on the right side of the bubble. Entering that game against Ohio State, you figured they needed to beat either Ohio State or Michigan State to lock up a spot potentially in the big dance. I don't know if it's locked up yet, but they have definitely done wonders for their case. Now sitting at 17-9 overall, 9-6 in the Big Ten. And as I do some math, USC and UCLA, of course, still at the top. Two classic Big Ten basketball powerhouses out west, which is definitely Big Ten country. By the way, Big Ten Football Media Day in Vegas. I've got a bone to pick with that. But we can talk about that later. So at the top, still USC, UCLA, and then Ohio State, having been handed their fourth conference loss. Illinois and Maryland tied for fourth. Michigan alone in sixth. And then Indiana and Michigan State tied for seventh. Now, that's interesting because Indiana is in East Lansing today to take on Michigan State, which means they could take sole possession of seventh place, depending on whether or not Michigan plays today. Whether or not they do, I don't know. But what I do know is that the Indiana women have momentum, and they're going up north to the Breslin Center to take on Michigan State. The regular season coming to a close very quickly. Their last game is a week from today for the Indiana women. That is at Purdue in West Lafayette. If you want to catch them at home, you've got one more chance to do that. They host Maryland, always a good program, on Thursday night at 7. So that is where the Indiana women stand. Again, they're on the right side of the bubble right now. They're not even on the bubble anymore, I don't think. But there are a lot of Big Ten teams right on the edge of either making or missing the big dance. Looks like Indiana is going to be just fine. So credit to Terry Morin. As usual, the model of consistency in Indiana women's basketball. 8 straight 20-win seasons. Now, she's 17-9 this year. And you point back to some of those early season struggles that they had, losing to Harvard at home in overtime, losing to Butler in a game that wasn't close. You'd like to have a couple of those back, but that was when they were still trying to figure things out. Very different roster, and I think ultimately they have figured things out. You need to win all 3 of these games to get to 20 wins. Not that that milestone really would mean a whole lot, but I do think it would be understandable if Indiana women's basketball does not get to 20 wins this year. Just to get, again, as we've said all season, it's hard to account for the production of your All-American post player who was one of the best to ever do it in program history. And Sarah Scalia as well, someone who really came into his own as a perimeter shooter last year. Tough to replace that kind of production, but Indiana's done a good job of picking up the pieces, and it's been a season of ups and downs. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. A good job by Indiana women's basketball to take down a very talented Ohio State team. And it goes to show, I think, what Assembly Hall can be in big games. And it's certainly been that for the women's team over the last few years. You think about their games against Iowa. You think about when they clinched the Big Ten against Purdue a couple years back. That was when Purdue was actually good. Purdue is not very good this year on the women's side. But on the men's side, we will find out just how good they are in Assembly Hall today at 1:30 on CBS. I wonder if it'll be Andrew Catalan or Spiro Ditas on the call. That's a couple play-by-play guys who Indiana people are very familiar with, of course. It seems like one of them is always assigned to Colts games. So they become the de facto home Colts TV play-by-play guy, even though there is no such thing in the world of NFL football. So Indiana taking on Purdue today. Then you've got Penn State on Wednesday. Washington next Saturday out west, followed by Oregon on Tuesday night at 9. That's March 4th. Then you close the season on March 8th against Ohio State. for the men. And Kenya Hunter, who is now filling in for Mike Woodson, I guess, in every single media facet, which is interesting. Kenya Hunter taking over on the radio show, taking over on the written previews, taking over on pretty much everything as far as I can tell. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of that. I get it, man. Mike Woodson's retiring, and everything that he says is scrutinized to death now, right? But you're still the head coach, you know? If you didn't want to be the head coach for the rest of the season, just step down. Just retire right now. But if you're not going to talk to the media, if you're not going to take accountability, if you're not going to answer questions from Don Fisher, the guy who's been doing this job for over 50 years as the voice of Indiana, you're going to duck his radio show? That just doesn't sit right with me. You know, it's one thing I understand. Fans are ruthless. The Indiana media can be ruthless. I get that. But ducking Don Fisher just does not sit right with me at all. You know, Don Fisher is somebody who has been there through literally everything. And, you know, he brings it every single broadcast that he does, and he's done thousands of them at this point. He shows up for every single one. So I don't like that Mike Woodson is ducking Don Fisher on the pregame show or on the postgame show or on Inside Indiana Basketball at Hoosier Hanks. That's just not right. That's not right. But Kenya Hunter is now basically just going to be the public-facing mouthpiece for IU basketball. And he echoes some of the same beliefs that Mike Woodson does about how Indiana still has the talent to make a run. Indiana's had the talent all year. They've had the talent since July. We know that this team is talented. That's not the issue. The coaching and the execution are the issues. And, you know, it's coach speak to say, we didn't execute. You know, we had the chances, we just didn't get it done. Indiana's done a lot of not getting it done this year. That's one of the reasons they lost to Purdue. But that horse is dead, and we've beaten it to a pulp. Indiana does still have the talent to make a run. And Indiana is going to use, now this is from Pete DePremio, great writer. It's funny, though. He says that Indiana can use its win against Michigan State and its win against Ohio State as evidence of what's possible. You look at the schedule, right? The win against Michigan State and the win against Ohio State, those are the only wins that Indiana has since January 17th. 2 wins in the last 5+ weeks, almost 6 weeks now. That is, it's not lying, right? It's just it's not crazy. It's a tactful omission of the truth, I should say. You're tactically holding some details out. Because what that stretch doesn't tell you is that Indiana also blew a lead against Northwestern, choked late against Maryland, choked late against Purdue, got blown out at Wisconsin, got close but never close enough after getting down early to Michigan, and lost a very winnable game against UCLA. But yes, Indiana does still have the talent to make a run. It's just that a lot of that talent has not executed down the stretch of these games. You know, you'll also throw out the cliche, we're taking it one game at a time. The margin between winning and losing is slim. Well, duh. That's it in every sport at this level. Everything's a must-win game. Yeah, of course this is a must-win game. Every single one is at this point. It's been that way for a long time. It just feels like coach speak. It's coach speak. It's annoying. And Kenya Hunter lauds Luke Goody's consistency. Okay. Why is he not starting every game? Why is he not getting more touches than he is, especially against Purdue? I'd like to see Luke Goody get a lot of touches today because Goody grew up in the state of Indiana and he knows what it means to beat Purdue. Why is Trey Galloway not getting more touches? He got a lot of touches against Purdue at Mackey Arena, and by and large, he was good, especially down the stretch in that game. He made a couple key buckets for Indiana. I'd like to see Galloway handle the ball a lot. Hunter continues saying that Miles Rice and Kanan Carlisle are both sophomores and they're learning. Okay, if Miles is learning, then why is he getting the ball when the game is on the line? Shouldn't that be in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing? I don't know. That's just me. Again, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a basketball guru. I'm no JJ Redick, right? But it just doesn't make sense to me. That's all. That's all. I'm not saying I have the answers, but I can tell you what not to do based on what I've seen. and there's a lot that I wish. There's a lot that a lot of people wish that would have gone differently this year for Indiana men's basketball. If Mike Woodson can beat Purdue today, I think that would do a lot for the team. Because, Woodson, even though Indiana has struggled relative to Purdue during Woodson's tenure, for some reason they always give Purdue their best. And it's because it's a rivalry game, and I get that. But Mike Woodson would be 500 against Purdue with a win today for his career. And I think that would be a good way to patch up some of the goodwill that's been lost with Indiana fans. So again, Purdue, 1:30 p.m. on CBS. The Boilermakers, the number 13 team in the country. I don't know if they're as talented as Indiana on paper, but they definitely play better as a unit. And when they're clicking, they're very hard to beat. Now, they haven't been clicking lately at all. Ever since they beat ever since they beat USC at Mackey Arena, Eric Musselman was very angry in that game. Purdue just has not looked like themselves, I think is a good way to put it. They just have not been all there. You look at the way they lost to Wisconsin again. They just could not play defense against Wisconsin in the second half. They lost to Michigan State at the Breslin Center. That was kind of a get-right game for Michigan State. And you go back to Ann Arbor when Purdue played up there with a chance to take sole possession of the top spot in the Big Ten, and the officiating just completely hosed them. And that was not good. But the Boilermakers are as cohesive as any team in the Big Ten, I think. Braden Smith, of course, he needs no introduction. Probably the best point guard in the country at this point. If not, he's in the top two. Smith is incredible. He can score from anywhere. He can facilitate as well as anybody. Trey Coffin-Renn, I'm excited to see how he and Umar Ballo match up. Hopefully neither of them get into foul trouble, although I don't think Indiana fans would mind if Coffman-Renn gets into foul trouble, because then you get Caleb First. And Purdue has, had some questions to answer with the cohesiveness of First and Trey Coffman-Renn playing together, playing separately. It's just not smooth sailing for the Boilermakers. They're in a very weird spot. So I think Indiana has a chance to take advantage of that later this afternoon at Assembly Hall and on CBS. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotocap with you. The sun is in my face, but I actually don't mind because we haven't seen a lot of the sun in Bloomington. Maybe it's a sign of good things to come later this afternoon when the Indiana men take on Purdue at Assembly Hall. That's a 1:30 p.m. tip. And I'm interested to see the student turnout because it's difficult for me to tell given where I usually sit for these games up in Section K in the auxiliary media seating, let's just call it. But I do not believe the balcony has been full for any Indiana men's basketball game this season. I might be wrong, but in the games that I've been to, some of which have been pretty big, Michigan, Maryland, UCLA, etc., the balcony has had a lot of people dressed as seats. I feel like if there's any game for both sides of the balcony to be full, for all 17,222 seats to actually have people in them, don't go by the listed attendance. That's just by the tickets sold. I do think that if there's ever a day for the balcony to be full, this is the day. Of course, it's a rivalry game, so why would there be empty seats? But you never know. You never know. I would like to see the balconies full. One of those, of course, should be full of students, but I've seen a lot of students selling their tickets for this game. And that's weird because I believe it was mostly upperclassmen who got tickets to this game. The freshmen, I think, mostly got tickets to UCLA, and they did not show up. There were plenty of shirts left on the seats after the stripe out. So I wonder if the upperclassmen will follow suit and sell their tickets and not show up. I think if they do, that is a massive missed opportunity, and it would give Purdue a better chance because when Assembly Hall is loud, it is very tough to play there. But if the students aren't going to bring it, then okay, don't complain if Indiana loses. That's my 2 cents. I think if you're a student and you have a ticket, you should go. But there are always excuses. Oh, it's a Sunday afternoon. People are studying. Who cares, man? Study later. That's what Kurt Signetti said. I know the midterms are coming up and whatever. I've got a midterm on Tuesday, actually. So does Mackenzie Mbako. So hopefully he's thinking less about that midterm and more about the Purdue Boilermakers coming to town. But who knows? It's sport marketing. It's a pretty easy class. I'm sure he'll be fine. He'll be great. And I haven't seen him in class since like the first day. Actually, no, I saw him once in the 5th week, but only twice, and we're about a month and a half into the semester at this point. So, I guess I'm not surprised. Tell you what, though, in terms of not showing up, Indiana baseball didn't do a lot of showing up on opening weekend. They finally got in the win column yesterday with a win over Fordham. Fordham is not very good, but you'll take a slump buster whenever you can get it. The Hoosiers won that one 15-2. They were up 2-0 in the first. The game was tied at 2, and then Indiana scored 13 unanswered runs. Fordham could not buy a strike against Indiana baseball yesterday. I think they had more walks than Indiana had hits. If they did not, it was very close. Indiana hit safely 12 times, which should win you most games. And Indiana also walked, 14 times. So more walks for Fordham than hits allowed. That's just not a recipe for success. But also give credit to Indiana starting pitcher Gavin Siebold, who seems to be the greatest pitcher of all time after the first inning. He gave up both runs in the first inning against Fordham. And the reason I say that is because not only did he completely shove after the first inning yesterday, he did the same thing last weekend against UNLV in Surprise, Arizona. That was Indiana baseball's first weekend series of the year. It wasn't really a tournament. It's one of those round robins where everybody plays everybody. But Indiana played UNLV. Siebold gave up 4 straight hits to start the game, which culminated in a grand slam, and then settled in after that. So Gavin Siebold yesterday on the pitching side of things was very solid for the Hoosiers. As the starter, he picked up his first win of the season. I think pitching wins are kind of stupid, but Siebold got it done very effectively. 6 innings, 2 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. Just 75 pitches as well. So you look for the efficiency, that's there. By comparison, Robbie Stewart, Fordham's starter, threw 87 pitches in less than 3 innings of work. So a really good job by Gavin Siebold. And then 4 relievers combined to shut down Fordham for the final 3 innings. And that's always good in those kinds of games. You think blowouts are boring. But a blowout is good because it gives you a chance to get in some new faces, give some guys some playing time who maybe have not experienced Big Ten baseball that much yet. And that's big because you want to build up depth as the season goes along. So Indiana baseball now 1-4 on the season. They will take on Harvard in Cary, North Carolina. That game actually is at 10 o'clock today. They had to move the schedule around because of the snow down in the Triangle in North Carolina. So Indiana will play Harvard at 10 o'clock today. That game is on usabaseball.tv. And it's also on the IU Sports Radio Network. You go to iuhoosiers.com/audio. And Ben Haller, my co-host, will have the call down there. The Hoosiers close this weekend against Northwestern, and that is a non-conference game for Indiana baseball. It's weird because Northwestern obviously is in the Big Ten, but this game against the Wildcats will not count in the Big Ten standings. Indiana does not begin Big Ten play until March 7th against Penn State. It's a little earlier this year because the Big Ten added 2 more conference series to bring the total from 24 games to 30. So Indiana now is looking at a very, very short non-conference for the rest of the season as far as weekends go. And I think that's a good thing. I think you'll have more meaningful games being played more often, and that is never a bad thing. They are supposed to play Xavier in their home opener. Right now, it's on the books for Tuesday at 4, but I don't know if that start time is going to stick. I say that because Indiana is, going to be traveling from Cary on Monday afternoon, and they'd be forced to play 4 straight games with no break for the second consecutive weekend. Only this time around, you throw a travel day in the mix. I don't know if they're going to stick with that. So you might see that game get moved potentially to Wednesday. Nothing's been announced yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happens. But for Indiana baseball, a good chance today to get another win, to get in the win column again against Harvard down in Cary. And it's funny because I was an intern down in Cary for USA Baseball. I was a broadcasting intern for them a couple of years ago. So it's kind of interesting to see that crossover, knowing that I called so many games on those fields. And let's just say I'm glad that they're turf now, because we had to spend a lot of time pulling and removing tarps from those fields. And oh boy, that made you question your love for the game. But it's a character builder. It is a character builder. And I think Indiana baseball has a chance to build some more character this weekend when they take on Xavier as well this Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever the game is played. Some point during the middle of the week, I think that's another good chance for them to get a win back because they played Xavier really close. They went to extra innings. Never led, but they went to extra innings in Arizona last weekend. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotocap with you. The sun is no longer in my face because it's rising higher in the sky, which again, I think is a good omen for Indiana men's basketball today. But optimism can only take you so far. And I do think that Indiana has a chance to take this game against Purdue. If you don't think they have a chance, then, man, what's it like being a negative Nancy all the time? I think that the way Indiana played against Purdue at Mackey was actually really solid. Better than solid. They played well enough to win that game. So you take the home crowd, you think, okay, yeah, they play the exact same. Maybe they have a chance. And that's the attitude that I'm going to take, and I think that you should take that attitude as well heading into this afternoon at Assembly Hall. Let's say, though, for a second that Indiana does not win this game against Purdue today. Their resume booster opportunities are gone, because their final 4 games are against Penn State, of course, Washington, Oregon, and Ohio State. Washington, you can probably, the West Coast trip as a whole, I would say you go 1-1. That's a success. I would say it's tough because Washington is worse than Oregon. But you play Oregon and you've been out there for a few days. You have time to adjust. You go out to Washington. That is a game that I could see Indiana losing, just because it's really tough to travel out there and play well in your first game of that trip. I'd be skeptical going into that one on Peacock. And then Tuesday night against Oregon, that's a 9 p.m. Eastern tip. The last time Indiana tipped off at 9 p.m., they beat Michigan State, so who knows? And Michigan State also wears green. So stranger things have happened. But the time before that was the Wisconsin game, and that game was over by 9:15 Eastern. Unfortunately, they had to play the rest of it, but it was over. 26-4. I mean, come on. Come on. But that's behind you. You look ahead at Purdue. Trey Kaufman-Renn has been on a tear lately for Purdue. 24.7 points per game over his last 6. That is probably one of the best in the country, definitely the best in the Big Ten. An absurd scoring pace for Kaufman-Renn. Indiana's going to have to defend the paint today. And if Oumar Ballo gets in foul trouble, okay, then you're really screwed if you're Indiana. Kaufman-Renn, 25 points over his last 6 games, averaging 25 points. He scored 23 against Indiana in West Lafayette. Of course, he had those big free throws to seal it late for Purdue. Braden Smith is 7 assists away from the Purdue program record as a junior. He is so good at basketball. And if you don't think Braden Smith is good at basketball just because he wears old gold and black, man, I don't know what to tell you, because Braden Smith is fantastic. He had 24, 7 assists, and 6 steals against Indiana in their meeting at Mackey Arena. That was another big part of why Indiana lost that game, was the turnovers. They gave Purdue, as I recall, a lot of extra possessions in that game. And, giving any team extra possessions is a bad idea. Giving a team as good as Purdue extra possessions is a really bad idea. Purdue had 26 points off of Indiana turnovers, and Purdue forced 20 Indiana turnovers while committing just 10 themselves. Yeah, twice as many extra possessions given up. That is not going to do you any favors. So if you're Indiana, it's not exactly rocket science today against Purdue, but you need to take care of the basketball better than you did in West Lafayette. Because we can play the what-if game all day, but if you didn't turn the ball over 20 times, you probably would have won. That simple. That simple for Indiana men's basketball. Just take care of the ball. Just be smart. Don't be Miles Rice 3 times a game where he chucks a pass 3/4 of the length of the floor and it goes over the baseline. Don't do that. Braden Smith, he's a defensive pest. He's probably going to force some turnovers, but you can't let that spiral into bad decision-making. I think that's the key for Indiana today. Curt Cignetti preaches it. I know it's football. I know I'm comparing apples to carrots, right? But you got to be smart. You got to be disciplined. You got to be poised. This is a rivalry game. Of course, emotions always run high, but you can't let those emotions dictate the way you play. Much easier said than done. But if Purdue is able to get on Indiana defensively and force a whole bunch of turnovers, then it might be tough sledding for Indiana men's basketball. But the one advantage that Indiana does have is that they are much better rested than Purdue is. Again, it's rare. I don't know how it happened, but Indiana has not played in over a week. That's just odd at this point in the Big Ten season. It's mid-February at this point. You would think that there would be a consistent schedule, but there's not. But it favors Indiana, so I'd say that it's fine and that we don't need to talk about it anymore. Purdue is less well-rested than Indiana. They were up in East Lansing on Tuesday, where they lost to Michigan State. And before that, the day after Indiana played UCLA, Purdue lost to Wisconsin at home. So over the past 8 days, Purdue has played 2 games, and they've lost both of them. Indiana has not played since Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day was a while back. So the Hoosiers should be fresh today. And if they're not fresh, I think we need to start asking questions about what in the world Cliff Marshall does. I've been on the record saying that, I feel like Cliff Marshall, based on what we've seen with how Indiana shoots free throws sometimes, especially last year, whatever he was doing was not very good. I don't know if he had them just going full upper body on game day or what, but that was bad. That was a bad time to watch Indiana basketball. And if they come out flat today, I'm going to have some questions. But that's a big if. So, again, if you're Indiana, just take care of the ball today. Be smart. Let the home crowd carry you, because if you're at all in this game, the crowd is going to be behind you. We've seen that time and time again here lately. Every single time Indiana's played at home since the start, really, since the end of January, the crowd has been behind them whenever they're close. The problem in those games is that Indiana gets down early and they get down big, and it takes all the energy out of the building, and then the crowd kind of has to spoon-feed the energy to them. Like, all right, here we go. Time to start making a run. Then they start making a run, the crowd gets behind them, and some mistake inevitably costs them the game. So ideally, if you're Indiana today, just don't get down big. Easier said than done, again, but you've got to be smart with the ball, because Purdue is going to try to disrupt you. They're going to try to be pesky. They're going to try to be annoying. And that was a big part of why they forced 20 turnovers at Mackey Arena. So something to keep an eye on this afternoon. It's a 1:30 tip, kind of an odd time. The last game Indiana played on CBS, I believe, was Michigan. That game tipped at 1 o'clock. So just 30 minutes later today, afternoon hoops at the Hall, and I'm excited to see how this one plays out. The Indiana women will tip off at 2 against Michigan State. So if you're going for some double screen action, that is the way to do it. That game for the Indiana women, I believe, is on Peacock. Fact-checking myself. It's on Big Ten Network, so never mind. You don't even need Peacock. That is going to be a fun one, because I feel like Michigan State's always really, really good. They just played UCLA down to the wire in Westwood at Pauley Pavilion. So that should be a good matchup between two teams that are playing well right now. And that game has massive implications in the Big Ten standings. The Indiana women and the Michigan State women are tied in the Big Ten standings. So you think about seeding for the conference tournament in Indianapolis. This game could go a long way. Of course, we saw Indiana get upset in the Big Ten tournament last year, but I don't think that's going to happen again this season. We'll talk more IU sports when we come back, including Indiana softball, which was on a 10-game winning streak prior to yesterday. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rodecap with you, hour 2 of IU Sports Sunday, and we're an hour away from first pitch for Indiana baseball, which is just odd. These early season round robins can be weird. Really weird sometimes. Playing at 10 a.m. on a Sunday, weird. Sometimes they play at noon here in Bloomington, or 1 p.m. That's normal, but 10 a.m. on a Sunday against Harvard, you might see some weird things. It almost feels like travel baseball for the Hoosiers. They are 1-4 on the diamond this year. So far, you've got about 51 games left, so I wouldn't overreact to any sort of early season struggles. These first couple weeks are kind of just oddballs. Teams are still trying to figure things out as far as their pitching staff, as far as lineup construction, as far as, well, pretty much everything besides Devin Taylor for Indiana baseball. So I wouldn't put too much stock in their slow start to the season. You would have liked to see them get one win last weekend. And we didn't have a chance to talk about the series finale because it was played on Monday afternoon. But Indiana against UNLV, this was a very, very odd game. 13-12 was the final in 10 innings, and 11 combined runs were scored in the final 2 innings. That's pretty much a good way to sum it up. Indiana took a 3-0 lead in the second inning, but really just could not hold on. Every single time the Hoosiers scored, UNLV answered. It was 4-3 and then 7-3 UNLV in the fourth. Indiana made it 7-6. The teams traded scoreless innings. Hoosiers tied it at 7 in the seventh inning, and then UNLV takes a 9-7 lead. Indiana rallies. UNLV then has an unbelievable 10th inning, culminating in their second grand slam against Indiana in as many games against the Hoosiers. Indiana did get back to within a run because Corbin Dickerson, the Louisville transfer outfielder, who didn't get a lot of playing time with the Cardinals a couple hours down south, has really been swinging it well for Indiana this year. He hit his first homer, a 3-run shot in the 10th, but Indiana did not complete the comeback in that game against UNLV. And that was a game that a lot of fans were understandably frustrated by because it pointed to a bigger theme of the weekend, which was bullpen struggles and Indiana's inability to hold a lead against tougher competition, which I will say is something that we're not going to really see signs of improvement on this weekend because Indiana is playing much weaker opponents in North Carolina. Northwestern is one of the worst baseball programs in the Big Ten, at least they have been for the last couple years. Harvard, the Ivy League, like really, maybe a one-bid league if they're lucky. And Fordham won less than 20 games last year and walked more batters than they allowed to hit safely yesterday. So if you're looking for bullpen improvements for Indiana baseball, then I would expect that you have to wait a little while longer to see whether or not those will materialize. But the early returns were not encouraging, that much we know for sure. Again, Indiana had a chance. They actually had a chance to win the game against UNLV on Monday in the 9th inning. They had a shot after they tied it, but they did not come through. I don't remember exactly what happened in the bottom of the 9th. It was chaotic. So Corbin Dickerson began the rally. Jake Hanley moved both into scoring position. Will Moore then beat out a double play. He beat the throw to first on what would have ended the game, but he hustled down the line, and that allowed Andrew Wiggins to score to tie the game. Indiana then that allowed Corbin Dickerson to score to tie the game, excuse me. Jake Stadler had an infield hit. Moore moved into scoring position, representing the winning run. Devin Taylor, the right man for the job, flew out to left field. And with how teams pitch Devin Taylor right now, it's weird to say, but I don't know that he's the guy I would want in a high-leverage situation, just because you know that he's going to get absolutely nothing to hit. Taylor, of course, preseason All-American, preseason Big Ten Player of the Year, unanimous selection, one of the most talented players in Indiana baseball history at this point. He's probably going to break the career home run record this year. Just absurd numbers for Devin Taylor. He's not sneaking up on anybody. I remember the fans on social media were saying, please win this game in the 9th. Don't go to extras. Taylor flew out with the winning run on second base. Indiana then gave up a grand slam without getting it out in the 10th inning. And part of that was because their pitching staff was completely run dry. Which, again, everybody else played 4 games that weekend, too. So why could Indiana not put together the pitching depth? Well, they just simply don't have it yet. They've got a lot of guys, but they don't know where those guys fit. And they had thrown all their A-listers to try to win the games on Friday and Saturday, and some of those guys just could not come back for Monday. So you had a freshman, Henry Brummel, making his debut after Matthew Bonnert, the Lipscomb transfer, gave up a leadoff walk and then a single to start the inning. So it's a tough spot because you have the go-ahead run on second base for a freshman who has never pitched in the college ranks coming in the 10th inning of a tie game. He then walks the next guy, and then J.P. Heft, I think, was the lucky winner. Grand slam to straightaway left, made it 13-9. So in a vacuum, it's a tough result, but when you contextualize it it's like anything else. It makes a little bit more sense. I don't think Henry Brummel was put in a fair situation at all, right? Go ahead, run on second base, 2 on, nobody out, tie game, 10th inning. Good luck. That's just a tough spot for anybody to be put into, let alone a freshman in his first college game. So if you went at Henry Brummel for that, you are a coward. Shame on you. Because if I put you in that situation, you would crumble like a ton of bricks. On a lighter note, Indiana will take on Harvard, a much less formidable opponent here in about 48 minutes. Again, that game is on usabaseball.tv. If you're looking for some Sunday morning viewing, it's also on the IU Sports Radio Network, iuhoosiers.com/audio. My co-host Ben Haller has the call from Cary, sitting in the same seat where I sat and called about 65 games down in North Carolina a couple summers ago. Cool crossover. That series will finish tomorrow morning at 11. Monday morning baseball. Just college baseball is the greatest because you get weird things like this that happen more often than you might think. But, if you're Fordham, you lost 15-2 yesterday against Indiana, but at least you aren't Rice. Rice and Oregon played yesterday in one of the more gut-wrenching losses of the season for the Owls. They were in Eugene, I think it was, I don't know if it was Rice. I don't remember who it was. I thought it was Rice because I saw blue on their jerseys. We'll take a look because this story is actually one that I want to tell. It was Rhode Island. Yeah. Different team wearing blue, but it was in Eugene. And the teams played a doubleheader yesterday. Oregon took down Rhode Island 1-0 in 11 innings yesterday. That game was just stupid. The Oregon Ducks, of course, the preseason Big Ten favorites, right? They actually lost to Rhode Island on Friday night. So if Rhode Island won on Saturday afternoon, they would have clinched the series against Oregon. Again, a top 15 team, a consensus Big Ten favorite, taking on Rhode Island. And in that game, the Rhode Island starting pitcher, Tristan Levesque, he pulled what I'd like to call a Rich Hill, which is where you actually throw more than 9 shutout innings, and your team still loses. Tristan Levesque, the Rhode Island starter, yesterday against top 15 Oregon, 10 shutout innings, allowing just 3 hits. He struck out 9 batters, walked 2, and threw 119 pitches. 10 shutout innings. Rhode Island couldn't buy him a run. Colin Clark for Oregon matched him. 7 shutout innings, allowed just 4 hits, threw 84 pitches, very efficient. Levesque, very efficient too. 119 pitches for 10 innings. Connor Johnston comes in for Rhode Island in the 11th. Gets the first 2 outs, and then just one of the worst ways I've ever seen that a team can lose a game. Johnson allowed a 1-out single. Runner stole second base. Ground out moves the guy to third. So you've got 2 outs. The winning run is on third base. It's a scoreless game. It's the 11th inning. You're in Eugene, Oregon in February, so it's probably pretty cold. Ground ball to the shortstop on a 2-2 pitch. So you're a strike away from getting out of it. Ground ball to the shortstop. Shortstop throws it in the dirt. First baseman can't pick it. Guy reaches on an error. Rhode Island loses 1-0 on a walk-off E6 in 11 innings. Wasting an effort from their starting pitcher that probably turned his elbow into jelly. Again, through 119 pitches, 10 shutout innings, allowed just 3 hits, walked a pair. Just brutal. Brutal for Tristan Levesque. You don't see many guys going that deep into games ever. 10 innings, obviously, is crazy. But 119 pitches this early in the season. That is tough. To put it all out there for your guys and then not get rewarded. That's why the pitching win is stupid. Pitching wins are dumb. You shouldn't pay attention to them. Tristan Levesque, you're a dog, and I'm sorry that Rhode Island could not come through for you. But that is the chaos of college baseball. And if you're not a college baseball fan, then what are you doing? Get with the program. These guys might not be household names, but it's fun. It's entertaining. It's hard to watch. I know that. People complain about Big Ten Plus all the time, and I get it. It's a subscription. It's another subscription. It's annoying. As a student media member, though, it gives us opportunities that we wouldn't otherwise have. And I'm very grateful for that. I understand if fans are frustrated by it. The fortunate thing is, at least for Indiana, they post all the highlights on Twitter, which is nice. So that's fun. But I understand why fans are frustrated with Big Ten Plus. The big moments, though, seem to always find their way around. 11.7 College Baseball does a good job promoting the sport. And I know college baseball, it's kind of dumb because they play games in mid-February or late February like it is right now. And you never know any of the guys, some of the guys who are even on your own team, you don't know. But if you want to support college baseball, there's no better time to do it than right now because, once they get to Omaha, once they get to the College World Series, it is electric. But you'd like to follow the journey along the way as well because it is a very entertaining product. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. They won't be home until March, but I think we should talk about Indiana softball here on IU Sports Sunday. Nick Rotocap with you. Indiana softball was on a 9-game winning streak. That streak got snapped, unfortunately. Actually, it was a 10-game winning streak. But they could not keep it going. They ran into number 12 Texas Tech, got run ruled in 5 innings down in Lubbock, but the Hoosiers 10-2 under head coach Shauna Stanton this season. They had won 10 in a row, extending that streak to double digits, beating UTEP 12-2, but then fell to Texas Tech. Indiana softball, though, has kind of mirrored baseball's success over the last couple of years. The difference on the softball side is that last season, they found themselves in the win column 40 times. Second consecutive 40-win season under Shauna Stanton last season, and they are off to a very good start this year, 10-2. No conference games played yet, obviously. Those do not begin until a little bit further down the road on March 15th, so about 3 weeks away. Just a 2-game series against Iowa to open Big Ten play, which is kind of unusual. But Indiana will get another crack at Texas Tech today at 12:30. That is on ESPN+. Texas Tech, a top 15 team. The Red Raiders, very formidable opponent. College softball and baseball are kind of similar in that there's a lot of chaos. And early in the season, especially, there are a lot of upsets that tend to take place, one of which, actually multiple of which, have come against Duke. The Duke Blue Devils, one of the top programs in the ACC year in and year out, they have gotten off to an awful start this year. 3-3 overall. For a team that was one of the ACC's favorites, they got off to a 1-2 start on opening weekend in Durham. They lost a series to Cincinnati. They lost the series opener decisively on Friday, and then they had to use extra innings to even the series. And then on Sunday, the Blue Devils just got blown out by Cincinnati. 19-5, the final in the series decider. And that led to Cincinnati being ranked in the top 25 for college baseball for the first time ever. The first time the Bearcats have ever been ranked in college baseball. Duke then returned home for a weekend series against Cornell and lost that opener 11-8. So they have a rubber match against Cornell today at noon. They won yesterday 16-2, did Duke. But the Blue Devils, yikes. And all of these games they played in Durham as well. They haven't gone away from home yet. But they just have not gotten anything going. Again, it's early in the season. Weird stuff happens. It's pretty funny to watch as a neutral observer. Cincinnati, on the other hand, 3-2. They lost to UNLV on a walk-off yesterday. That game at UNLV, a 4-game series. Those are free to watch on YouTube. UNLV is a good team. Their series against Cincinnati tied at 1. Their series against Cincinnati is tied at 1. Next game today at 4:05, and then they have a Monday night first pitch, 9:05 p.m. Eastern, against Cincinnati and UNLV down in Las Vegas. I'm telling you, man, UNLV does a good job. College baseball can be hard to watch sometimes because, again, you need subscriptions, maybe like Big Ten Plus, ESPN Plus, whatever. But UNLV does a good job. They stream their games free of charge on YouTube. So if you're looking for some late-night college baseball tomorrow, that game starts at 9:05 p.m. Eastern. It's college baseball. It's free to watch. I recommend doing so. Indiana, on the other hand, again, they'll take on Harvard here in about 35 minutes. That game on usabaseball.tv. I will say it's a 2-cam stream, but there are no broadcasters on that stream, and the nat sound is very low. The natural sound, one of the better parts of the baseball viewing experience, really not that accessible. But Ben Haller has the call. IUHoosiers.com/audio, part of the IU Sports Radio Network there. They do play Xavier. Indiana does. That game will be on Big Ten Plus, but I don't know if it's going to be played on Tuesday or Wednesday. They told us that the broadcast has been moved back to Wednesday at 2, which suggests that the game is getting moved to Wednesday at 2. The schedule page still says it's on Tuesday at 4, but I don't know that Indiana's going to play the day after a travel day, after having played a game on that travel day and the 2 preceding days. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, especially considering Indiana baseball goes back to the South this coming weekend. They'll go down to Florida, playing 2 games against Mount St. Mary's and 2 games against Stetson. Stetson, a team that I think in this part of the country anyway, kind of flies under the radar. But the Hatters had a very good year last year on the diamond. They'll see Indiana twice next weekend. Stetson in 2024, I believe they made the NCAA tournament. They won 41 games, 20-10 in league play in the ASUN, and they made it to, checking my records here to make sure I'm right, they made it to the ASUN championship and then won that championship at home against Kennesaw State. They made a regional. They upset Alabama in the Tallahassee regional, but then were eliminated by the University of Central Florida. So an NCAA tournament team facing off against Indiana next weekend. One game is part of a Friday doubleheader, and then a Saturday afternoon tilt against the Hatters for Indiana as well. Those should be entertaining games because whenever NCAA tournament teams take each other on, it's usually some entertaining baseball. Even when they're not tournament teams. Again, UNLV had Indiana's number. They didn't make the tournament last year, but college baseball is chaos, and being along for the ride, I think, is a good thing. But if you want to watch Indiana baseball at home, you should get your first chance to do that this week when they take on Xavier. Keep your eyes posted for a schedule change, though. I'm pretty sure the game is going to be played on Wednesday, again, because I was actually supposed to call that game on Big Ten Plus, but it's going to be moved, I think, to Wednesday at 2. That's what I've heard. It's not official on the Athletics website yet, but I would expect that information to become public in the coming days. And again, it makes sense logistically because you play in Cary at 11 o'clock on Monday. You then have to come home, and you would have to play on Tuesday at 4. So you move the game back an extra day. You get a day off. You get a chance to actually have some pitching for that game before you head down to Deland, Florida for a game against Mount St. Mary's at 2 o'clock on Friday. So logistically, it does make sense. College baseball teams play a ton of games. There's a ton of travel involved as well. And I think it's best for everybody that that game gets moved back, especially because there still might be snow on the ground, even though it's going to be 50 degrees here for the next few days in Bloomington. Mercifully, there is still snow on the ground, and it's going to take a while for that to melt and for it to drain. So something to keep an eye on as well. The perks of playing a summer sport in the winter, as Jeff Mercer would say, and it's a sentiment that is echoed across the country. Missouri's softball coach, Larissa Anderson, said a similar thing. She said there's no way softball should be played in February, and she's right. Neither should baseball. No diamond sports should be played in February. MLB spring training just started this past Thursday. There's a reason for that. There's a reason that they don't play regular season games until April. And even some of those have to be altered because of snow or freezing cold temperatures. The problem with trying to move the seasons for the diamond sports is that there are so many moving parts. You've got the academic calendar to worry about, and the regular season for baseball and softball already ends after school ends. For baseball, it's about 3 weeks later, and as far as postseason play, if you make the College World Series final, you're playing as late as the summer solstice, which is around June 21st, June 23rd. That's about 6 weeks after the semester ends here at IU and at most other places around the country as well. And, you could say, well, why don't we just move the College World Series up? Or why don't we move it back? Why don't we move it back to mid-July? Well, for baseball, you can't because of the MLB All-Star break. And the All-Star break, of course, encompasses the MLB draft, which takes place about 3 weeks after the end of the season. The end of the college baseball season does. So MLB's not going to move the All-Star break because college baseball exists. Obviously, MLB does not exclusively get its talent from the college ranks, but the players that they do draft from college, a lot of them play in the College World Series in Omaha. Think of Paul Skeens, for example. Obviously a unicorn as far as talent goes, but there were plenty of scouts who made the trip to Charles Schwab Field to watch Paul Skeens and others on that LSU team play and get one final in-person scout on them before they decided whether or not to select them in the draft. So I don't know if there's a fix for this. On the surface, you could say, yeah, you can move the college baseball season back. You can move the college softball season back. Maybe start them both on March 15th. That's around the start of, actually, I think, is that around the start of spring? I don't know. The weather's warmer. That's what I do know. So logically, it would make it more fair because, of course, when it's frigid outside, like it has been in Bloomington for the last couple of weeks, when there's snow on the ground, you can't practice outside. And for baseball and softball, you need live reps to get better. I think that's a part of the reason why Indiana went 0-4 this past weekend. Now, obviously, they won yesterday, but you can't get a lot of live reps when it's this cold, when it's snowy outside. It's just not safe. So, in a vacuum, moving the season back would work. Realistically, I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I feel like if the NCAA had a fix, they would have implemented it already. It's not like college baseball and softball are new at all. But I think the reason, they have to play a certain amount of games, right? Baseball is a game where sample size is your friend. The bigger the sample size, the better. You want to get about 56 games in. And in order to do that, you have to start the season really early. And for these northern teams, you've got to play the games. You've got to guarantee that you can play them. And if the ground is frozen, you can't play the games. So that's why these teams go south. That's why they go west. That's why they go, to Texas and play at Globe Life Field. That's why they go down to Florida. And I don't know that there's really a better alternative, unfortunately. And I also think that's why a lot of the nation's top talent in baseball and softball plays down south. That's why the SEC and ACC are so dominant. And that's why the Pac-12 even was really successful in baseball. And unfortunately, it got blown up. But the Pac-12 teams were so successful, I think, in part because of the climates where they play. You think of the SEC, LSU, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt. Nashville is not too different from Indiana, but it's a little further south. You think of the teams that make the College World Series, more often than not, they're teams from the South or from the Southeast. North Carolina, Duke, Florida State made the College World Series last year. Florida made the College World Series final 2 years ago, lost to LSU. I could go on. Texas is always good. Texas A&M is arguably the best team in the country right now. There's a reason for that. It's because these teams partly play down south and they can recruit and say, hey, you want to play outside in warm weather in February? Come play for us. And obviously success breeds success as well. But the weather is a big piece of that puzzle. And that's not to knock on what Indiana has done. Jeff Mercer does a great job recruiting, does a great job getting the most out of his players. But when you spend as much time on the road as teams like Indiana do, it's just a very tough situation as far as being able to sustain success. When you're playing in a different venue every week, you're not sleeping in your own bed that often early in the season. You spend so much time away from home. Oh, and by the way, you're still taking classes. It's a very tough situation, and I commend college baseball players because to play at that level and to do what they do, you really have to love the game. Obviously, they know what they signed up for, but it is not an easy task. So I don't know if you can move the baseball season back. I think in a perfect world, you should. But the Southern schools certainly aren't complaining, and why would they? You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotocap with you. We were talking about moving the college baseball season back and why it wouldn't work. It's an unfortunate dilemma to be stuck in, but it's one where the Big Ten is probably one of the biggest losers. The Big Ten has not won the College World Series since 1966. Yeah, you heard that right. 1966 was the last time a team from the Big Ten won it all. And don't you dare try to claim USC's national championships during the 70s or UCLA's national title from not that long ago as a Big Ten title, because that is almost as egregious as the the ACC trying to claim all of the Pac-12's Olympic medals. No, we do not do that here. The Big Ten, obviously, is primarily comprised of Midwestern teams, and I say primarily because you've now got classic Big Ten cities like Los Angeles, California, and Westwood, California, and Seattle, Washington, classic Big Ten places, right? As part of that. But it's usually cold in the Big Ten, in this part of the year. I know it's a shocking revelation for everybody, right? But I don't know that there's a fix for this, and that's the tough thing, because the College World Series ends, and then 3 weeks later the MLB draft takes place. So what? You're going to push the College World Series closer to the MLB draft? You're going to give those players less time to rest? I don't know. And you've also got to consider the draft combine, which takes place, I believe, in mid-June, off the top of my head. You know what? Let's look it up. Because there are so many moving parts to this. The MLB draft takes place, or the draft combine takes place about a month before the draft, June 20th through 25th, around the same time as the Men's College World Series. So either you're getting scouted at the College World Series, if you are somebody who has pro potential, or you go to the draft combine. You get an invite. Doesn't mean you're going to get drafted, but you get an invite. So you would have to move everything back. And then you got to consider that, okay, some of these guys, maybe after the draft combine, they either go home, they rest, they recover, they train, or they play summer ball somewhere. And the summer baseball seasons run usually through June and July. So if you push back the end of the regular season, then those summer teams, which again are businesses, they rely on those teams to, make revenue for them. They give the players a chance to stay sharp, maybe work on things that their coaches have told them to work on. They also give local communities something to do in the summer. They give internship opportunities as well. So are you going to push those seasons back too? There's so much going on when it comes to the scheduling of college baseball as it relates to, the other things that these athletes do. I think that's why the season can't be moved. It's tough, right? You can't control the weather. But, you could say, okay, why don't we do a split season? Play some games in August, September, early October, and then start back up again in March. One, fans are going to lose interest. I'm not going to pick up college baseball in March and say, oh, my team was 26-15 before the season break. No. You can do that if you're Formula One, because you're a global sport. They take 4 weeks off in August, right? It's called the summer break. It's July and August. You're Formula One. You can do that. But if you're college baseball, you can't just disappear off the face of the earth for 3 months. I get the idea of a split season, but also not only would that completely kill fan interest, I think it would also harm the players. Because these guys, again, after their 60-game college season ends, a lot of them play summer ball. Now, those seasons are usually between 50 and 60 games long. If you're on the Cape, it's closer to 45. But for college baseball guys, you're playing anywhere from 90 to 120 games in the span of about, I want to say, 4 or 5 months, right? So what you can't do is split the season up, right? Because you'd play, let's say, 25 games in the spring. Then you play 60 games of summer ball, so that's 85 games. And then you come back on campus and you play another 25 games, 30 games, whatever it is. That's just too much. And then to start it back up again in March or whenever you do it, I don't know that would make a lot of sense. And also, if you play a split season, you're competing with the biggest, I'd say the second biggest sport in America after the NFL, obviously college football, right? And you compete with college basketball even more than you already do. Because college basketball starts in October, late October, November, that part of fall, right? College baseball gets traction later in the year because it's one of the only college sports that's on. And, there's track and there's golf, but the subsets of the country that care about those sports are comparatively smaller. College baseball has its place in the college sports landscape. It takes precedence. The national side, people start caring about it in late April, early May as the front runners really start to separate themselves. And then postseason play starts, and anything can happen. Once you get to Omaha, it's one of the most electric experiences that you can have in all of college sports, in my opinion. The fan bases are incredible. I don't think that we should take away from the tradition, from the pageantry of the College World Series in mid to late June because it's cold. And I know that sucks. And, as somebody who's covered Indiana baseball, I get it. I've sat outside when it's 40 degrees and covered a midweek game against Middle Tennessee State. That's not baseball weather. But you've got to play the games. And if you want to play home games and you choose to play for a team in this part of the country, then that, I think, is just one of the consequences of that. And the other pitfall, of course, is these teams spend a lot of time away from home. It's not unique to Indiana. This is a problem that impacts about 3/4 of the country. And you think majority rules, but really, I just don't see a way to fix it, unfortunately. Until we can build domes over every college baseball and softball stadium, I think this is the reality that we are going to be faced with. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap alongside for the ride this morning, I should say. Feels like the afternoon because the sun is up. And that makes me happy. And hopefully, Indiana playing Purdue this afternoon will make me happy too. Call it false hope, call it insanity, I don't care. I'm optimistic that my university will win a basketball game against its biggest rival today in Bloomington. And I think that is okay. Yes, Purdue is much better than Indiana. Yes, both of these teams have been slumping lately if you look at the big picture. I still think it's insane. I said this earlier, but I think it's crazy. This is the first 3-game losing streak Purdue has had in 5 years. What in the world? I mean, I knew that they were consistent. I didn't know they were that consistent. Just that level of sustained success is incredible. I'll put it into context for you real quick. Indiana this season has had they've only had one 3-game losing streak, but they haven't won more than they haven't won more than 2 consecutive games since they beat Penn State and USC on January 5th and January 8th. They have not had more than one 3-game losing streak this year. We go back to last year, and I feel like that's going to change pretty quickly. Those blowout losses to Auburn and the Kansas game wasn't a blowout. They choked that one away. But, yeah, Purdue has been much more consistent than Indiana. I don't think that's exactly rocket science at this point. But, again, you look at the big picture for Indiana men's basketball. They beat Purdue today. They could find themselves on the right side of the bubble on Selection Sunday, assuming that they take care of business against everyone else, i.e. beating Penn State, Washington, and Ohio State. If you don't beat Purdue, I know I've said this a lot, but you don't beat Purdue today, your season is pretty much over. You would need a ton of outside help. You would need a ton of other bubble teams to also lose a lot to find yourself in. And even if you find a way, there's a chance that you'd only be a play-in team if you lose to Purdue and maybe win out. But again, winning at Oregon, I don't know. Oregon just overcame a 17-point deficit on the road against Wisconsin. And I think Oregon is better than their record shows. They've been inconsistent, right? But has there been any team in the Big Ten that's been consistent this year? I don't really think so. And that's what happens when you have an 18-team super conference that literally goes coast to coast. Somehow Rutgers was able to go to Washington and beat the Huskies, which is just ridiculous, right? To go to Seattle from Piscataway and win, that is a 2,847-mile trip. If you were to drive, it would take you 39 hours without stopping. Somehow Rutgers was able to go to Seattle and win. I have no idea how. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And I really do wonder, how much time are these guys now spending on planes, traveling, especially when they go on these trips? And for the West Coast teams as well, it's not like the traditional Big Ten teams where you just, you go out to the West Coast once or twice, right? And you knock out both games while you're there. These guys, UCLA, USC, Washington, Oregon, for basketball, they've got to keep coming over. Because UCLA, for example, they played Indiana and they played Illinois last week. They then, I think, went back home if I remember right. Yeah, so after they played Indiana, they went back to Pauley Pavilion, lost to Minnesota. They host Ohio State today, and then they go to Mackey Arena and they go to Welsh Ryan Arena, and then they go back home to play USC. And you wonder why why UCLA is so inconsistent. UCLA is so inconsistent. Washington is bad, and Oregon is inconsistent. It's because they're traveling so much. They're basically, at this point, professional teams that spend every other waking moment on the road. The difference is, in the NBA, unless you're J.R. Smith, obviously J.R. Smith isn't in the NBA anymore, but most of those guys aren't taking classes while they do it. So I think that realignment has really put these guys in sort of an impossible spot where they're just being asked to do too much. And I do really think that eventually we're going to hit a breaking point where football is going to branch off and have its own super conference. Especially if what happens with the Big Ten and the SEC is going to happen where they each push for 4 auto bids to the playoff. What are we doing? I really don't know what we're doing. Indiana was looked at as a team that didn't deserve to be in the college football playoff after they lost to Notre Dame. Sean McDonough said that he thought Indiana was going to be better. Maybe they weren't that good. Kirk Herbstreit said they were outclassed. I disagree. I disagree wholeheartedly. I think that if they wanted their SEC darlings in, then those SEC darlings shouldn't have lost to Oklahoma, shouldn't have lost to Florida, shouldn't have lost to Alabama, if you're Alabama, Ole Miss, or South Carolina, respectively. You had your chances and you blew them. That was not Indiana's fault. But if the Big Ten was to somehow get 4 auto bids, Indiana would have gotten one of those auto bids to the playoff. So you can't have it both ways. I think that the auto bid should go to the champion of the Big Ten, not the champion and the next 3 best teams. If you're not the champion, you should have to earn your way in by proving you belong. And I'm sorry, but Indiana did that. I don't think that the way to go about this is to just make it a Big Ten and SEC invitational. I don't like that. I do think that we need to change the way the seeding works. The top 4 seeds should not be the top 4 conference champions. They should be the best 4 teams. If those happen to be SEC and Big Ten teams, then so be it. But that may change on a year-to-year basis. I don't know that having Arizona State and Boise State get byes was the way to go. All 4 teams that got byes lost. Georgia and Oregon, obviously, SEC, Big Ten. But I think that we're reaching a point now where football is going to have to separate from the rest of college sports as far as conferences go. Because for football, you can do that. You can do the whole travel across the coast because you play once a week, and it's very, very structured. You either play on a Friday or a Saturday, right? If you're in a power conference and you're making these kinds of trips. But for basketball, I just think it's become detrimental to the product. That's why there are a bajillion teams stuck in the middle of the Big Ten. It's because these teams just are not given a chance to perform fairly at their best. That's going to do it here on IU Sports Sunday. Indiana-Purdue, 1:30 on CBS. Whew, big day, big weekend in college sports. The Hoosiers have a big opportunity in front of them, and I hope that you will tune in. Maybe a little optimism could go a long way. I'm Nick Rodecap. You've been listening to IU Sports Sunday.